German studies after October 7th is our very nice and optimistic topic for the end of this long day. We're in the middle of a deep crisis. The attack of Hamas on October 7 on the Israeli settlements close to the border with the Gaza Strip, the kidnapping and murder, the ongoing war causing destruction and the terrible loss of human life, especially in Gaza. All this caused tensions, pain, fear, and insecurity within and beyond Israel. This conflict does not exclude academia. Pro-Palestinian protest camps have been set up on campuses worldwide. Israeli academic institutions and scholars are suffering from boycott. Freedom of speech and the borders and rules of this freedom are widely discussed in light of the fear of Jewish students over their security. And we would like to speak how all this affects us, the field of German studies in Israel. And I thank you all for staying on, for joining us for this last panel at the end of a very long day. My name is Irina David, and I'm the director of the Nuremberg Institute here in Jerusalem. I would like to introduce our three panelists. The fourth one, Professor Wünschmann, unfortunately cannot come, she's still with COVID. We have here, just starting on the right side, Professor Stefan Ihrig. He's the head of the Haifa Center for German and European Studies and co-editor of the Journal of Holocaust Research. He's a professor of history and works on various aspects of European and Middle Eastern history, especially Armenian and Turkish history. Professor Gisela Dachs teaches at the European Forum and the Center for the DRD for German Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She's also a book author and journalist, having worked for decades for French, Swiss, Austrian and German media, foremost for the Die Zeit. And then we have Professor Gideon Reuveni, the director of the Weidenfeld Institute for Jewish Studies at the University of Sussex in the UK. This year he was a fellow at the Israeli Institute for Advanced Studies, leading a research group on reparations for historical injustice after the Holocaust in global context. I would like to start with a question actually to the three of you, and Stefan, maybe you're going to start. What's the situation on the ground currently? You're the head of a research institute. What's the situation?
Well, it's a difficult question. I think it's interesting that you started announcing that our colleague Kim is sick with COVID. We just came out of one crisis and it feels like we stumbled into the next one, and so we started the academic year teaching online again. It was difficult to get a pulse, what is going on campus. At my center, people studying modern German and European studies for an MA. Some of them are international, some of them from Israel. I don't know, it's kind of a wait-and-see situation, but we used to have, a more lively community, you could say that. Yeah, it's a little bit wait-and-see.
Gisela, you want to continue? You just you're continuously pursuing this Hebrew University European Forum barometer about the relations between the countries. What can you say from there about the situation? Also, how do you experience the situation from where you stand?
Well, I mean, what I can say, does this work?
Yes, it works.
So it's that what we had already in the past has only been sharpened, that you had a kind of an asymmetry when it comes to mutual perceptions between Germany and Israel. I mean, meaning you have a bigger openness in Israel today towards Germany than the other way around when it comes to general population. And not talking here about institutions that are very much supporting, even in these times, unlike universities from elsewhere, German-Israeli cooperation, also in academia, and saying, well, we have to continue. This is important. When it comes to perception, this is a studies or polls that had been done in the past at the Köbner Center in the 90s, where one question was always asked whether Israelis perceive relations to Germany as normal. Then you could see how, which is a kind of subversive question in a way, but whatever this might mean, normal. But then you had a tendency from 90 on, 2003, just going up to 90%, starting with 40, going up to 90%, and then it went a little bit down to 70, 75%. And when I picked up the study, it remained at 80%, 75%, But the interesting thing was when in the last poll I extended the survey to other countries such as Poland, France and United Kingdom. And then we asked the same questions whether Israelis do perceive relations as normal with these other countries. Then it turned out that the best and normal country, most normal relations are with Germany. So it's paramount to saying good relations, I would say. But that is really an irony, I would say, of history here. That you know, it's getting on the top as compared to other countries. But this is not, when you ask Germans, and there we ask the same questions, Germans do not see relations as normal, which can be explained. You have difference even between women and men, women even less so than men. And you do have in Germany, and I think that's the most relevant topic discussed here, you would even have a majority of Germans saying, yes, we do have a special responsibility towards Israel, I mean, referring to the Staatsräson, but asked about the support of the German government of Israel during the war, only 22% support the German government any longer. So there is difference between a general attitude, yeah, we have to help and we are responsible, but then concretely when it comes to specific support, there is a rejection, I would say, of the attitude of the German government.
Thank you. Gideon, you're usually researching and teaching in UK, and I mean, you've been now here in Jerusalem, viewing the situation from here. What you would say from your perspective? What's going on?
Good question. I mean, first of all, about your initial question about the situation of German studies in Israel, and I see that also as someone that is basically out of the system for now over 20 years, and when I compare the situation of this field, German history, German studies, when I studied in the 1990s and now, actually my perspective is very different because it's booming. And if you compare the situation of German studies in other countries like the US, the UK, and other European countries, it's even more, it seems even more as a kind of a booming situation, because in all other countries German studies are declining, there are less and less students, people don't learn German, there's less investment, and you know, originally when I arrived to Sussex, I actually was hired as the director of the German Jewish Study Center, and we actually changed the conception, and now we kind of became an institute, or we pretend to be an institute for Jewish studies, because we are, like most institutions of Jewish studies in the UK and the US, we live from private funding, and we simply stopped getting the funding from German Jews. So, and the field is declining all the time. So we are actually facing, without all these, you know, the question of October 7th, there are also other challenges that apparently the Israeli academia and the field in Israel didn't face until now. Actually, on the contrary, it was flooded with, from my perspective, yeah, it was flooded with funding, which of course I see it as a, you know, just earlier today we had this meeting with the ministry, and the message that, as I understand that, she said that actually now we're going to support you even more than before, which, you know, lucky you. But, you know, for us, it's exactly, you know, the opposite. We struggle for funding, we struggle for legitimacy also within our, and that is actually what is now even worse, because until now we basically struggled for funding, and so long we secured the funding, our immediate surrounding in the academia in a way tolerated us as a kind of a separate, independent kind of field of study. Now it becomes even more of a problem. So I think it's a very different context, what is going on in Israel and what's going on outside of Israel in this area of studies.
Can I answer? Sure. I think I answered a different question. So the situation on the ground, I was referring to how it is in this academic year, but in general I would agree that things were looking very much up for German studies in many ways, also You know, we have language schools, you know, teaching German, also the Hebrew, also we in Haifa. And over the past years, more and more people were coming. There was more demand, so that was something very interesting. You know, it started out with people with, you know, special German interests, you know, from Jekke's family and other study interests, and it became more and more. Then over the last years, you know, and the MA level often an entry point for other things, and also in the history department there you could see two other groups who were coming, you know, to be interested in all these topics. A lot of people came towards Holocaust oriented topics, but also many other fields, you know. What I meant with the wait and see is, you know, over the last year, different kinds of students were interested in coming. We had, for example, more foreign students studying German studies in Israel, you know, and then also doing Erasmus, going to Germany. We had from the Arab sector more students and so on. So that was interesting. And right now, I'm not quite sure what the future will bring. Also because we have a general decline, you know, in demand for humanities-oriented programs. That is happening, you know, parallel to all of that. And but the other thing that you mentioned too, and I think actually right now, as you mentioned, we have an opportunity here because Germany is reaching out. You know, there is something happening here. Germany is reaching out more than other governments and other countries. And I think it's really crucial that we on the Israeli side here try to, you know, grab that hand and initiate some contact, because also another tendency that I saw in Haifa and from numbers which I heard about Erasmus in general in Israel, that more and more Israeli students didn't want to go abroad. You know, and that is a problem, I think, for society. And also less and less German students came to us with Erasmus. And I think that is something we have to monitor closely, that we don't drift apart even further after tourism.
I mean, I think on a more general level, and this is not connected to what's going on since the 7th of October, is how much are German studies in Israel humanities, or can also be more social sciences, as you have in the United States, for example, that you really have Germany studies and then it's larger. And I think, unlike Haifa, I mean, we are at the Hebrew University, we have tried to keep it, in fact, within, I mean, as an interdisciplinary study field, which I think is great, I mean, in a way, to come from different sides, including humanities, but we have kept it in social sciences. With this idea in mind that then, I mean, people will be able also, if they study and they don't want to stay in academia, but they are interested and they want to learn and know, also for finding jobs. And being then in this cultural, economic, whatever business of bridge German-Israeli relations to Europe, and having it somehow larger also when it comes to other European countries. I mean, I think that is something that it's not yet clear whether you can have both at the same time, whether this moves, because, I mean, the interest, I mean, the humanity departments are declining everywhere. So that's also a question then for German studies, how to maneuver within this.
Okay, thank you very much. As we have experienced today, German studies in Israel are very broad field. It's more humanities, as you said, and also German studies is often also with German Jewish studies. These topics are coming in, but still the question would be, how did the war and the 7th of October affect different fields of research? For example, you probably remember all this discussion about the use of the term Shoah in relation to what happens on the 7th of October, and on the other side, you know, claiming that Israel is pursuing genocide. How does this come together? How does these discussions affect fields of work? Stefan, you want to take that?
Oy vey.
It's not an easy question, is it?
No.
So I'm also teaching in a program, a Holocaust study program, also involved closely in our journal there. Yeah, it's a topic. I don't know. I don't have the feeling that it's affecting us as much yet, these kind of theoretical issues in our day-to-day life and work and with the students, you know, but I feel it will be coming more. I'm waiting to see how we all are going to deal with this kind of post-colonial discourse that's going to reach us in the field, and how it's going to impact us also when it comes to funding in the future, study of development and all that. I'm a bit wary of that.
Okay.
Maybe I should add to that, because I don't think it really affects the field in Israel, to be honest, because in a way it's a very closed, I mean, it will affect the moment that people from here, and that's also, I think, the discourse here, how it's going to affect, for instance, publications, how it's going to affect all kinds of exchanges, projects, ERC, funding, kind of research funding. But again, coming from the outside now, I can tell you for sure it already affects, for instance, the way I position, or we as an institution position ourselves within our university in the UK. And I'm just going to give you kind of, because we are now in a very small circle of people and we're not filmed or anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so this we're going to have to erase at some point. But for instance, we had, you know, what you just said before about how the Holocaust now is being politicized. I mean, this has now become, you know, basically when you say Holocaust, Holocaust studies, Holocaust memory and everything, it's been now more and more seen in connection to, you know, in a political kind of, there's a political reading for that as being kind of justifying the existence of Israel. And it's immediately been read and been kind of placed in this context. And it has sometimes, I mean, in my kind of area, we recently received a very big funding for a project in Holocaust studies, kind of more broadly. And there was an issue hiring people, or let's say, put it this way, there were pressure from some colleagues in my university to not collaborate with this project because it deals with the Holocaust. And, you know, the people actually who are, you know, the main players and the PI in this project are not Jewish, they have nothing to do, and definitely not Israeli even. So all these things are now very, you know, new, and I'm sure that there are more and more of these examples that basically, at least at this level, I think it's too early to predict how it's going to develop, but already affects our day-to-day, our kind of day-to-day life in the academia, in the universities. And the other thing, of course, how it affects us, how we, you know, the self-censorship. And I feel that already with myself, how I communicate with my colleagues, what I tell them, what I don't tell them. And I all the time I kind of reflect about, you know, I suddenly find myself, you know, basically when I talk to colleagues, I need to kind of, I think what I'm saying and how it's going to be perceived by them. And this is something that did not happen before in such an intensity. It was, especially in the UK, always very politicized, but now it's been, you know, it's a different level and different intensity. And I assume that it will also affect people here once they go outside and want to go outside.
I mean, this affects already now. I mean, when first of all, I think you're right. I mean, the careers of younger scholars, there are more and more people who refuse to be reviewers. So once you need for a career to apply for foreign review, they would just say no, right now. And already before 7th of October, there was this silent, you know, boycotting, no, not answering emails, not going into it, but now it's outspoken. I mean, yesterday we just had a faculty meeting and there were the letters shown. I mean, this is very clear what is being said. And then the other thing is about people coming in. I mean, Eastern Europeans, you have Prague, Banja Luska, Germany, and then Jewish American professors. That's basically people who travel. I mean, you could also say it's a country in war. So, I mean, I know that in the UK, you do have even travel warnings. So somebody recently just cancelled or postponed by saying there was a foreign office in Great Britain said there's a travel warning, maybe a good excuse or not, go no. But that's the area in which we are dealing with the things.
Yeah.
So from what I'm hearing from you, I mean, there's on the one side the perspective. So maybe from Germany coming, there's even more funding or more will. You know, we just heard this today to strengthen the bridge. And then there is a decline of the humanities and uncertainty about actually young students coming into the field. So what can be done about it? What's the perspective? You have a perspective about that? You said somehow we should a field of research, right? How then if you're thinking about these tensions of boycott or like, you know, having discussions just within Israel and a certain distance from what's going on in the world, that is quite crucial for academia, right? If you are just speaking with inside the Hebrew world.
So I think, you know, like compared to other, let's say, area studies or, you know, specific country-related histories, we're in a relatively better position for now. I think especially as more established scholars, we are also in a bit better position. Like Gisela said now, it's not only that, you know, people will boycott you, not invite you to conferences, peer reviews and such, you know, it's also now, it means another period where you don't, you know, build networks, connect with people, you know, and you're distant. And things like this study day today, we need to do more and need to think about, you know, these more vulnerable kind of generations, I think. You know, and as institutions, we're also dealing, let's say, with other groups, like my center, Leo Beck and such, you know, we need to also think and get the embassy and others involved, you know, have more student exchange, have people, you know, meeting each other, so that these countries don't drift apart so much. You know? I mean, like, a few years ago, I really thought, you know, we could go a little bit more along the French-German way, you know, and become closer, you know, rebuild these city partnerships which became sleepy in a lot of places, you know, and do something together. And now we have to start again, kind of, it feels like.
Yeah, I'm interested in my course about German-French relations, talking about that, which was very popular 6 years ago, and then 4 years ago, and then 2 years ago. Now no interest anymore. I mean, that's something I think just right now it's not anymore a model or an idea or just thinking this could be, you know, how things would work out. That also tells something about, you know, the general atmosphere and state of mind.
No, please.
So at the end of the day, we're historians, so just let's get a bit back to the past. We're in a crisis. That's not the first war, not the first crisis in Israel. So thinking about earlier periods, early 80s, 67, is it just another crisis? Or are we experiencing a new quality? So what would you think? Again, always in relations with...
I still think we don't know yet. I mean, the thing is not over. So if, let's say, in 1, 2, 3 months, I don't know, will be somehow settlements, I don't know, with the North, with Gaza and elections, I don't know. If we get on a different path, I think things, I mean, would ultimately probably calm down and getting, I mean, I'm directing a DFG project, and it was interesting that my partners at Freie Universität Berlin, they were just saying, when is this going to be over? We want to be for a sabbatical here. So, okay, so they just wait until the day after the war to come here and wait. This must end one day. So they don't go even into the whole thinking, being very pragmatical. But if, on the other hand, it takes much, much, much longer, I don't know how lasting. I mean, there will be lasting effects. That's already clear now. But I don't know how lasting this will be then for us in our business. How bad it can. As the student said, it can always be worse.
No, I agree. I think, I mean, if we also look at other, I mean, I remember, most of us probably remember 9/11, how we thought that the world was going to change. And I think we now have a generation that we have to explain to them what is 9/11. So it's, I think, much too early to even start reflecting as to whether this was just another episode in a long chain of crisis, or something that really fundamentally changed a lot of things. So it will take a little bit more time.
Yeah.
To step half out of the German studies a bit for a second. So I'm also working on German-Turkish relations. Now I worked on Erdogan, and it's a biography of him, and I argue that he's basically a super spreader of anti-Semitism. He has done that for like 20 years, and also especially in the diaspora in Europe. In Germany is a prime target here. And for a long time it wasn't really supervised, or what do you say, controlled what is going on there, and it wasn't really on the radar, you know, and it has been becoming very, very strong. And so, you know, to end even on a more pessimistic note, while I'm more optimistic about what can happen here in our region, I think the effects, this kind of breakthrough of a new kind of anti-Semitism, and not only in this one group, but also in other groups. There are many actors here. That's something we will have to grapple with for a long time. And apparently they've been able also to break out of these ethnic diaspora groups. It's been spreading kind of. And I think, there weren't enough specialists looking out for that, for warning signs in the last 15, 20 years, what's going on. And I'm not talking about mosques, that were under supervision. I'm talking about online, social media and all these things. And it's racial anti-Semitism from the 19th century, it's hardcore.
And what I think is probably the most missing thing, that I like the super spreader corona thing about Erdogan, where you combine, the experiences of the last year. Yes, it is that, there's the irony on the one hand that in the diaspora, Jews are thinking about maybe we should move to Israel because it's getting very dangerous, or it could become, and Israelis thinking about where to get out and how. So kind of we could all switch apartments with each other to check it out. But I think the problem is deeper, because if there is this spread of anti-Semitism, so most of the people who usually dealt with anti-Semitism, they know how to answer the classical anti-Semitism and to say, no, this should not be said, and that's not good, and that's bad. But most of the people today who want even to fight anti-Semitism or are in charge of fighting anti-Semitism, they are faced with a situation that you cannot talk about the topic without being able to relate to the Middle East conflict and to Israel. And that clearly, most of the people are completely unequipped to do that, because they don't know. So this is why they try to hold the conversation in familiar territory where they can answer, but this goes beside the point. And this is why we're in a situation where even trying to fight back, it's done in either complete abstruse situations where it's only delegitimization and 48 discussions. Also there you need, to answer if there is really a counterpart, and then get into discussions. But who can do that? So even all those in Europe, I would say, or in the United States, who are very much engaged on that side, I think they are at a loss, and they are really not well equipped to make anything better.
I think this is really an interesting point what you raised now, because it kind of brings also about, a little bit goes back to this issue of the asymmetry between Germany and Israel in the relations. So Germany invests a lot of money and resources in developing German Jewish studies in Israel and also in Germany. But, how many, what is the situation, for instance, of Israel studies in Germany?
None. Yeah.
And then there's, of course, Middle Eastern studies. But like in other places, there's no really correlation between them. And then we have this gap that you talked about. So I think this is really kind of an interesting development that, very much emphasizes the kind of how problematic this situation is, and how charged it is.
Yes, please.
Listening to you, I've been thinking about my project, and I sense the most intensely that to understand Israeli and German relations as also in the perspective of 7th October. It is almost indispensable to understand once more the final solution phenomenon in long time perspective from mid-19th century until actually the impersonalization and legalization of violence. How did it happen? Which cluster of institutions produced this, first of all, the pseudo or bastard Darwinian definition of nationhood that did allow the monstrosity and the relinquishing of monotheist creed, that is adoption of a pagan creed, which produced the final solution. I think that seeing the self-correcting measures that is adopted by the German government, especially under Angela Merkel, that even stipulated that the migrants from tsunami areas are very welcome, provided they do not adopt genocidal, anti-Semitic ideologies and so on, this gives some kind of motivation to understand that this bastard Darwinian or quasi-Darwinian, that's perfect Darwinian ideologies have been traveling in Europe long before the final solution. That is, they reached Germany, they reached other places every time for different reasons. They reached the Balts, they reached the Ukrainians, and so on and so forth. And it was a cluster of institutions that produced the impersonalization, bureaucratization, that is, the industrialized hierarchy of Germany that needed a unification, maybe was a grateful prey for this phenomenon. But I think that to study the spatial mobility of people, the migration of people, and spatial mobility technologies, also the spatial mobility of the exchange of thought, the telegraph, the telephone, the internet, and so on and so forth. To study the impact upon the formation of cluster institutions that may result in a monstrous solution, such as monstrous, that is, deeds such as 7th October, might be fruitful in long time perspective since the imperial industrializations and modernizations at the mid of the 19th century.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to get back to what you said before. I mean, it's not only that Israel is changing, also Germany is changing, and there are new generations coming. There are a lot of immigrants in Germany in different backgrounds. So I think also this will really change the relations and are scholars in Israel prepared? I think it goes into both directions, right? The reasons why people are in contact from Germany with Israel won't be the same in the next generation. And how will this affect us? What can we do about this? And are the motivations in Israel the same? I mean, who is the next generations of students here might be interested in Germany?
It's a question or ending, closing remark?
Good question. No, I have one more topic, but if you don't want to speak about that one. Yeah, just a final thing, and then we also, if there are all questions or wishes to discuss, it was really the whole story of the freedom of speech, freedom in academia, and what started in the US, what came to Germany, the whole discussion in academia in German, and how does this affect, what's the effect of us here, and how can we deal with that? What's your take on this?
No. You first of all can only deal with it directly if somebody wants to deal with you. So I think that's the first thing. So if it's on this official side of people saying we don't want to have to do anything which is linked to Zionistic institutions, including universities and other things, then there is no dialogue possible. And I think that I can only refer to my colleague from the international department who says one has really clearly to distinguish between people who there is no point in talking to. I mean, if people, demonstrations are saying, well, Israel doesn't exist, I mean, I've talked to them and this kind of things, and it's all about 48, and there's no legitimization whatsoever, and then finding all kind of historical drawers to show that Israel should really, really, really go away. And then you have people who are wandering, seeing, I mean, that we all know, seeing horrible pictures from the Gaza Strip, that we see less. Don't want to see, I mean, whatever, even if we know about it, and where people don't know anything about the conflict and about the bigger context. But there again, we're coming back to that. Even, I mean, I was at the university, they started training of people to answer this kind of question. Also Israelis, I mean, do not necessarily know enough how to explain the conflict or how to go about, because it's complex. So I think that is, again, I'm coming back to my own point. It's not something that you can say in 3 words, and it's not a question of I mean, the problem is politicization. I mean, that whenever you say something, it's a question to which camp do you belong, and not a question of a serious debate where where facts, truth matter. And I think that's the most frightening thing.
Well, to add to that, I mean, I agree with Gisela about this point about politicization, that it's also, I mean, I think it's more complex because, I mean, you raised this issue of freedom of speech in the academia, and we always, you know, we have this tendency always to criticize the other, but not really reflect about ourselves. So we criticize, you know, those who actually call to boycott Israeli academia or Israel as a state because we think that, you know, they are denying, you know, Israeli suffering in, you know, in what happened the 7th of October. But at the same time, we have here examples already that happened since October 7th, where, you know, unfortunately, Israeli universities denied members of faculty saying certain things about, you know, the suffering of the Palestinians because, you know, it doesn't really fit the, so, and that is kind of this circle that basically, you know, those who actually, not all of them, but it's part of it. It's not only, the thing is also about listening to each other. And so there is this criticism that, you know, the Israel denial of you know, the situation, the Palestinian situation. And then the Israel kind of reaction is that, you know, you are actually denying our situation, kind of our unfortunate situation. So it's a kind of this kind of vicious circle between these kind of, you know, everybody's accusing the other side or the other, you know, the others of lack of empathy, which is also interesting, you know, that these expectations of, you know, kind of that we need to feel the other. And we, at the same time, we expect others to be empathetic to our situation, but it seems that we are not able to do that to other people. And this is, I think, one of the kind of the core of this misunderstandings that is going on.
But here, I mean, you're talking about Hebrew University, about freedom of speech, where it was...
Well, it was Hebrew University, it was Tel Aviv University. I'm not sure what about Haifa, but I'm sure there were issues.
I would really challenge you. From my point of view, it was not people were emphasizing the suffering of Palestinians. It was really very precisely about denying, in fact, facts. That, I mean, and here it's an interesting discussion, freedom of speech and what you do with it. And I mean, if it would be definitely denying people talking about the suffering, that would be horrible. I mean, then there's no point in academia at all, but I don't think that this is what happened. You could still then argue freedom of speech should be also the possibility to claim a different truth. But then it's a different debate. I don't think it was about a lack of empathy.
I think that was what has been emphasized in the media, but you know, the case that we're talking about was, I think, a podcast. It was almost 2 hours, so a lot of things were discussed there. But eventually, this section was emphasized and picked, and basically became the pretext for all what happened. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, Ofer, if you know more about this incident, but I think it goes back kind of to these kind of issues.
Our faculty association called for us to protest today at Tel Aviv University, nationwide initiative, because the government is planning to control what we are saying politically in the
government. That's a different thing. Yeah.
And you know, if we talked about parallel things at the same time happening, so this is another thing happening. And you know, like, I'm not selling my book. Perhaps of all the boycotts, it will never be published anyway. But initially, my idea to work on Erdogan's Turkey was some development we had here in Israel many years ago, where actually there was this attempt already to have students monitor what we say in the classroom. And you know, back then people said, "But we are not Turkey. Don't come with these Turkish examples." And you know, today with elections in America looming over us. We are thinking different about these kind of tendencies. But anyway, that's another aspect that we have to be, I think, aware of. You know, academia in wartime needs special protection, and this also applies for, you know, what we are dealing with here. And especially as all Israeli universities have to deal with very conflicting views about these things. And it's not going to get any easier. And that's, of course, the hard thing for us too when we are hit by boycotts, that people don't understand that, you know, there is a micro context here where we're dealing with these things already. And, you know, of course, we don't get any credit for that. We're just thrown out, you know, with the water anyway. Oh, that's another negative.
Thank you very much. We originally thought to open the room for other questions, but I see it's already 7 o'clock, and I thought we can, I don't know, I think we won't manage to end on a more optimistic note here. And so I would just thank the three of you for the conversation and you for your participation in the whole day. And